Hi again, and welcome to another episode of the Government Transformation Show, the podcast for public sector changemakers. Joining me today as my guest is Rachel Lane, who's Principal Head of Contact Centre Strategy at Medallia. We're going to be talking about service automation. There's plenty of it going on in the public sector, but can it be done better? How do we bring stakeholders into the process? How do we make sure nobody's left behind? What does automation really mean? What can technology do? And what are the possibilities looming over the horizon? Lots to cover, so Rachel's going to share some of her insights gained from multiple public sector agencies and projects that she's worked across. Loads to unpack, so let's jump into the conversation right now. So Rachel, welcome to the Government Transformation Show. Really great to have you joining us today for the conversation.
Thank you very much, Tim. I've been excited about doing this today, so really pleased to be here.
Excellent. Glad to be a highlight in your calendar. And we're looking forward to exploring a topic that's obviously very close to your heart and that Medallia's, which is around service automation. A lot of it going on, some good, some not so good. So we want to explore why to do it, how to do it, what the benefits are potentially, how to do a good job to help these public sector organisations along the way. So we're going to jump into some of that stuff as we go along. But before we do, let's just set the scene a little. So maybe you could just introduce yourself, explain your sort of current role in Medallia and how you're working with the public sector.
Yeah, so I'm what we call a solution principal for Medallia. And my particular area of specialty is the contact centre. So as you can imagine, I work in the public sector a lot. I've been with Medallia 5 years, but I've been working across the contact centre piece for 10 years, and I've been in customer and citizen experience now for about 14 years. So I've seen a lot, and I know we're going to talk about some of that stuff today. Primarily, my role at the minute, I'm about 70% customer facing. So of all the customers that Medallia works for, and I should explain that if you don't know Medallia, we're a vendor of customer, citizen, and employee engagement solutions. So typically, back in the day, we used to be thought of being the survey guys. So that post-call engagement survey that come out, that was very often a Medallia survey. Since then, we've moved massively over the last 20 years, and we've been working across PubSec for almost 20 years now. So as you can imagine, we've worked with lots, and we continue to work with lots of government organisations right across the world. My role specifically, as I say, it's very customer focused, but also I'm quite a futurologist as well. So I'm very involved in deployments of technology that are going to enable that engagement between citizens and the employees. So very often that's contact center agents, but obviously we think about it in a much wider form than that, because there's a lot of people that are behind the desks in creating these great service experiences that we're going to talk about today. So I'm customer facing, but I'm also very interested in the challenges that we have out there today. And my role in understanding those challenges is there a technology suite that we can point towards those challenges to bring in great data to solve those challenges? That's kind of my day-to-day role with Medallia today.
Fab. And great that you're in that customer facing role, because I guess you're then exposed to a lot of different organizations. So start to maybe unpack what some of those kind of perspectives are from different agencies you're working with as we go along. Be really interested to hear those perspectives. So we're going to talk about service automation, and that can encompass all kinds of things. So it's a kind of nice badge, but it can mean a lot of things to different organizations, different extents, different channels, and so on. So for you and Medallia, the service automation piece, what does that kind of mean? And then I suppose that the key point is why do it? What's the benefit to citizens, which ultimately is what we're all about?
Yeah, exactly. So service automation is a huge topic, particularly in the public sector, but also across private sector as well. But when I think about the public sector, we're looking at, we have a public duty to provide value for money for citizens and taxpayers, and service automation is one of the key ways that can really drive up satisfaction and drive down that cost to serve. So, at Medallia, we've really been fortunate enough to be working across that public sector for, like I said earlier, almost 20 years, which is a long time in the world of technology. And public sector is, one of our most amazing parts of our business, because that's where we get the really impactful stories from.
Yeah.
So when I sit around the desk and talk with my colleagues about what I'm seeing out with our customers, there's really nothing more satisfying than seeing how a sector might have really embraced technology to improve the lives of its citizens. So in the world of the private sector, service improvements might deliver higher profits or better brand engagement, for example. But in the world of public sector, you've really got the ability to change lives and, even save lives. We've certainly seen that. So to be able to identify that customer at risk from a single engagement is really powerful. And that's what service automation can enable us to do. So sometimes we think of service automation is, a customer's got a query and we want to automate as much as that as we can. But service automation sometimes is actually about understanding the context of that customer query. Is that a customer at risk? Is that what's going to happen if that customer doesn't get what they need right now? If they don't get that form that they need in order to apply for, a grant, a pension, whatever it might be, what's the net effect of that? So, service automation in this particular sector is really, really important for us. And like I say, we see some of our most impactful stories coming from it.
Yeah. And as you say, so often people engage with public services at acute moments of need. So therefore it's not, well, do they want to give a smiley face to their experience or not? It's actually, does this fundamentally impact their lives in some way? So hugely powerful kind of use cases and case studies. And I suppose that leads me to thinking, well, how good is the public sector right now at using these tools and processes? A lot happened during the pandemic where, we had to digitize services and so on. But now we're kind of emerging from that. What's the state of play in terms of how well you think government and public services currently use automation? Are they doing a good job? Could they do more?
Well, I think many of the government organisations that we work with, they're doing tremendously well with service automation. And they've invested both in technology and change processes as well, because, you can create service automation through processes. You don't even need technology in order to do that. However, and when you're looking at applying technology, what it does is it gives you scale and it gives you consistency. So that's I think, being the biggest benefit across government and the deployment of that service automation. But also in some ways, it's been the trickiest part of it, because, you will see economies of scale. And I think if I was to look right across the agencies and think, actually, one of the things that we could do to improve in certain areas is just sharing our knowledge, sharing best practices and processes. So what I would say there, Tim, is I think they're doing tremendously well. They're doing more with less. I think, service is much more impactful than it used to be. But we've got to remember in the background that citizen experience and what their expectations are has changed. And I think, we've always struggled to keep up with the citizen, but now we're not only doing more with less, we've got a wider number of channels to do it with as well. So yeah, we're continuing to be in catch-up mode. The biggest change that I would say, though, is the real appetite and enthusiasm for service automation. I'm seeing, not just directives from senior leaders, I'm seeing stakeholders right across the board united in, that they really want to do their very best, and they see service automation as a way that they can make rapid improvements for their citizens, whilst also having that positive economic impact as well. Because if you get it right and you start to get service automation at scale and you start to deliver consistently, then, not only are you going to have happier citizens, but you're also going to make sure that you're able to contain your costs. So of course, that's the key thing that we're looking at here. So yes, we want smiley faces, but we also need to look at efficiencies whilst we're doing that. And service automation just lends itself beautifully.
Yeah. And, increasingly, every other aspect of our life has this degree of digital interaction, automation, and I suppose public services shouldn't be any different, right? You shouldn't have this sort of jarring contrast between your personal banking experience and getting your benefits or public services or what have you. So the bars, I guess, has been raised, and so for a public sector agency that is maybe not so far advanced in this, and they want to improve the whole process, I suppose it's from strategy to execution to implementation. So how can they start to improve the way they use automation? I mean, any top tips that you would share? You're obviously exposed to lots of different organizations and projects, so any themes you see where you would say that these are the things to focus on?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things, and you're right, not everybody is as mature within the service automation piece. There's still a lot of agencies that are in the early stages of their transformation, so one tip doesn't fit all, so to speak. But I think there's a few things that would help everybody. And I mentioned earlier about really sharing experiences, and there's two sides to this, because I see this, most of the government accounts that we work in, we spend quite a long time engaging with the senior stakeholders and the teams and sharing the best practices that we've learned from other government organizations that we've worked with. Now, it might well speed up this process if there was already that process in place, so that we come along and say, oh, you know what we learned at such and such? Well, actually, we can pretty much carbon copy that and then make adjustments to the way that you need to work within that. So I think, like I said before, it's about sharing best practices right across agencies. Internally, how we get the fastest success with service automation is we share stories of success internally. And I think this is something that we're getting much better at in public sector, but we've still got a long way to go. It's creating those internal heroes and those internal champions, so that when we start our service automation road, and it can be something relatively straightforward, it can be a part of a digital transformation piece, but as soon as we start, and I always say, within 90 days, there is enough data that you've gathered in that process to create a story. You'll have learned something, and you'll have learned actually what you did to create that magic moment and what you can do to make that bigger and better. So it's about creating those internal stories of success and sharing them, engaging. And, you don't have to do it agency-wide, but certainly do it internally, because then if you can create early pockets of excitement, that spreads really quickly. And then you'll find as you roll out service automation that it becomes much easier. Everybody's on board and people are preempting and wanting to know, actually, what's our roadmap for service automation? How is this going to change? And then very quickly, what we see is those, not just the stakeholders, but the wider teams starting to put forward ideas of, do you know what, if you added this into that program, it would, have X result or Y result. So we're starting to see a real need for crowdsourcing of ideas to help just pump that internal engine and get internal engagement going much quicker, much faster than it used to do. So, if I was just to say, on the engagement front alone, sharing best practices, sharing stories internally, and of course, sharing stories right across other agencies.
Yeah, so often it comes down to the people aspect as much as the systems and processes, doesn't it, about that buy-in?
It does. And I could honestly, Tim, I could sit here and talk about, this is the path of technology that you need to go along in order to create service improvement magic. But actually, let's make sure that we've got all the internal processes right first, and let's make sure that everybody understands their role in service automation, because it's not simply applying technology and the magic will happen. It's like, you know, we have to create those processes in order, you know, to enable this to work. And we want to get people excited about it so that people are talking about it and people want it to work. And, you know, in engagements where we've done this, and we always make this an early priority, we do things like stakeholder meetings to look at, okay, what's beyond your immediate critical success criteria of applying service automation. And if we get to know some of that, then we can really rapidly engage the entire business. So that can have huge benefits.
Yeah, it's really powerful. And there's an aspect of this that I think, you know, we always need to keep an eye on, which is around, not everybody is as digitally literate. Not everybody is in a place where they can engage via automated channels, online, whatever that might be, for various reasons. And so there's always this key need to focus on all users and not just the ones that love technology, would be happily engaged with digital services, you know, all day long. So how does the public sector need to approach that, so that in this exciting move towards digitization and automation, people aren't left behind or excluded from access?
Yeah, and my advice here is exactly the same as private sector. You have to know your customers, know your citizens, know what channels they need to be involved in, and that they prefer to engage with you on. And, you know, let's be honest, Tim, most of the time, nobody gets up in the morning thinking, I'm going to phone so-and-so, I'm going to phone such and such contact center. Nobody actually wants to do it. So ultimately, the more that we get to know those citizens, and we need to really be able to understand their life cycle with us as well. So what's the particular life cycle of this citizen, so that we can get to the point where we're proactive. So, you know, and that's going to save us huge money, but we can only do that by really knowing each of our citizens. It's great to create cohorts of citizens that are on similar journeys, and that will help you make technology decisions about what you need to deploy, what's the best way that you can do that. But ultimately, you know, where you're in an agency and you've got citizens at risk, that you want to identify those, and actually, you know, this citizen that's at risk here, we don't want them calling into us because we know that's a difficult thing for them to do. So we need to have a different service automation for this particular person, or it could be this group of people, so that we never call these people up. They like us to text us and we've got their mobile number. So that's how we engage. And that makes it, you know, truly complex, doesn't it, Tim? And it's a nightmare to administer. But if we get at the early stages, if we get all of the right data in and it's organized, then we're able to scale consistently. So those that are, you know, not mature in that service automation journey, and they've been buying just one or two pieces of service automation technology, or they've been doing digital transformation, I would say, you know, those early stages are really key to nail that detail, because as soon as you've got that detail, to scale up is much cheaper, and, you know, you'll get 10 times the return on it. So that it's that early piece that we tend to pay most attention to.
Yeah, build on the right foundations and so on.
Yeah.
So the Government Transformation Summit is fast approaching, 22nd of September, and you're going to be joining us to host the discussion table on service automation. And that's the real kind of core of the day, where obviously our civil service community will come together, discuss challenges, opportunities, maybe share progress, what's working, what's not working so well. So, you know, really, really important conversations around this topic. So for you, what are you looking forward maybe to sharing with those civil servants? What are the kind of key messages you want to get across to them during that?
I think from my perspective, and obviously, you know, mostly for me, this is about an opportunity to share stories, because whenever we start to look at feedback from these events and what the greatest learnings were, they're from the stories of those people that contribute. So it's mostly about that. But from my perspective, what I want to share is some of the greatest things perhaps that I've seen so far. but also maybe one or two predictions for the future, things that I feel that we should look out for, and how are we doing that. And I'll give you an example of that I talk a lot about at the minute, and that's, you know, frontline attrition, for example. It's not been a huge problem traditionally within public sector. However, things could be about to change. You know, we've got a tight labour market, of course, but we've also got many other organisations now that are providing more flexible working than some of the government agencies. How are we anticipating that, and how are we looking to build resilience in our business around that? So maybe something like that might be a good trigger for a conversation. But like you say, I'm really interested to see what some of those key challenges are that are going to be brought to the table.
Yeah. So in terms of those people that join you for those conversations, what do you want to hear from them? What do you need to understand that to help you move forward as well?
Yeah, I want to hear more about their challenges. I particularly want to hear about you know, some of the successes that they've had and how they're approaching some of those challenges, what their plans are. But also, you know, dig under the carpet a little bit and share something that, you know, I've got a challenge and I honestly don't know what to do. We're a loggerheads. You know, we might have people in our organization that are actually not on board with this. How do we turn this around? Those types of things as well. So that we get a mix of great stories, but also, you know, maybe there's an unfinished symphony in there as well.
Yeah, and that collaborative sharing, I think, is the key. It's the secret sauce, to coin the phrase, that I think really adds a huge amount of value. So yeah, we're excited, fast approaching. So looking forward to welcoming you and Medallia on the day. We've pretty much sort of hit up against time now for the episode, but as I said, looking forward to hosting you on the 22nd of September. But in the meantime, just remains me to say thank you for joining me, Rachel.
Thanks very much, Tim. It's been a joy.
Pleasure. So there we have it. Thank you to Rachel for joining me for that exploration of service automation in the public sector. As we mentioned, Rachel and Medallia will be joining us at the Government Transformation Summit on the 22nd of September at Church House in Westminster. Rachel's co-hosting a discussion table themed around service automation. So it's a chance for civil servants to join the topic discussions, share best practice, maybe share some of their challenges and pain points, and work on some collaborative solutions together. If you'd like to join us for that conversation and for many others happening on the day, then just click the link in the show notes attached to this episode to start your application process. That's about it for now, with another episode coming soon of the Government Transformation Show. But in the meantime, see you soon. Bye-bye.